Yes, Suchita.
A very good afternoon. On behalf of Rubber Skill Development Council, I welcome you all in today's Facebook Live session on skilling and essential to survive the new normal. I'm Suchita Roy, Regional Manager West in RSDC, moderator for this session. Looking at the present COVID-19 crisis, new skilling has become an urgent need and challenge for the industries. When done efficiently, it sets workplace up to be more flexible to face such disruptions as brought by the pandemic. The new normal means new skilling to prepare a more adaptable, agile workforce to tackle the ever evolving world of work. To know more about how skilling has emerged as a new normal in the present situation and how it is going to bring forward a positive change in the lives of people, today we have eminent speakers. We have Mr. Sanjeev Lahiri, Chief Human Resource Officer, GRP Limited at Mumbai. Mr. Lahiri is a C-suite HR professional with 22 years of experience at a global level in information and communication technology, trading, distribution, manufacturing, and holding companies, including startups. Along with the management degree, he also holds PGD in training and development from Indian Society of Training and Development, New Delhi. And we also have Ms. Neeti Sharma, Senior Vice President, Team Lease Services Limited and Management Representative, Team Lease Skills University. Ms. Neeti has over 30 years of rich and diverse experience in the corporate sector with government bodies and educational institutions pan-India. Ms. Neeti is passionate about skill development as she believes that by giving the right skills and guidance to people, she can make them employable and change their life forever. She pioneered PPP employment exchanges in India and was instrumental in starting India's first vocational skill university, Team Lee Skill University. She is also a member of Skill Council of CII. On behalf of Team RSDC, a warm welcome to both the speakers. I would also like to welcome all the participants from across different parts of the country who have joined this session and wish them an expected takeaway from this session. The audience can write the queries in the comment tab, and the queries will be answered by the speaker once the session is over. So, without much delay, I would like to call upon my guests to share their viewpoint on the topic. My first question goes to Mr. Lahiri. What is the skill gap you have identified in your existing manpower? What kind of skilling program you may suggest can be helpful for them to work more efficiently with minimum unsteadiness at the workforce? So, please.
Okay. Thank you, RSDC. Thank you, Suchita, for the opportunity. Good afternoon, everybody. It's indeed a pleasure and a privilege to be addressing you all and also sharing the same screen with Neeti, who needs no further introduction. Now, just before getting into directly into the question, I would just try to give a little context of GRP itself. So, GRP Limited started the journey 47 years ago into a sector which is very, very unknown at that point in time, which is recycling rubber.
Yeah.
So the entire thought process was to promote sustainability, because otherwise, if you imagine 1974, where most of us have been very young or might not have even born at that stage, we would have seen that the tires are actually burnt by the side of the road or end up in a landfill. Now, more to come to get a sustainable solution to that problem, and also to support the tire industry in particular. At that point in time, this entire initiative was taken on by our founder, Mr. Rajendra Gandhi. What GRP is today is we are proudly and very humbly one of the largest tire recyclers in the country, maybe in the world. We support the global tire industry. So I think more than 80% of the global tire brands would be our customers in some form or the other. Our entire effort is to use every part of a end of life tire and put that into use in some form or the other. So, for example, the natural rubber component from a tire and also a tube, yeah, it gets back as reclaimed rubber directly into the tire industry. The non-radial tires have nylon in it. We are probably the only company in the world to be extracting that nylon from that tire, blending it with the rubber, yeah, and create a new polymer base, which we call as industrial polymers. That gets into the auto industry and is a very wide use in the auto industry. Given looking at the plastic maintenance, we have now taken up blending rubber with plastic. That gives us an amazing product called rubber composite, which actually can replace concrete and wood in a lot of places. And in the snow-filled geographies of North America, etc., this product is. I mean, we are probably the only supplier into that region, if I can most humbly say. We all use tires in some form. Most of the tires, it gets eroded and reaches its ends of life in couple of years. Plus the cost of the tire as well. We got into actually tire retreading with a unique technology. Yeah. And last but not least, the part of the tire that cannot be used for any of these purposes is cut, slice, dice in various forms, blended together to create mats, and types of conveyors and so on and so forth, and gets back. So this is GRP in, a very short. We also are a great place to work. We got that certification just a couple of months ago amidst the lockdown, which was actually a great model booster. Coming now onto your question, Srita. This industry, again, I'm saying that there are a lot of players in the rubber industry. Most of them may be in the tire and in the rubber polymers, but recycling is unique. The skill levels that I have over here and also the processes are a bit more manual than we would want them to be. Yeah. We at this point in time are going through an amazing change phase where our machines are becoming more automatic, more intelligent. And so the first skill gap that I see for my people and people in the similar kind of industries is to accept that the work that men used to do earlier, women included, is can now be done by machines. And which means that this is not the only work that we have to do. Also, we are trying to really promote and upskill our people to take on things like autonomous maintenance. So we are actually trying to put this thought in our operators that, look, this is your machine. Yeah, everything of this machine is actually your responsibility. If you think a nut and bolt needs to be, aligned, can yourself do that? And we are willing to train you for that. The mindset needs to be opened up. Similarly, if I am working on one particular machine for quite some time, it is also important that I know the other machines. So there's cross skilling across processes and across machines. Yeah. Being in an industry which is not as technically savvy, if I can use that, you can use that word. It is not rocket science. However, this openness and this mindset change of the level of my workers on the shop floor, I think is absolutely the key, and that is going to be successful and that's going to make the workers successful, the workers much more in demand, I would say, and for companies like us, it does make a lot of a lot of sense, and comes with a lot of benefit for people being able to multi-skill. And we as an employer, we as an organization, we are committed to that. If I've answered your question.
Yeah, my next question goes to Ms. Neeti Sharma. Is she there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. My next question goes to you, ma'am. how skilling is helpful in fulfilling the current need of the industries which are recruiting fresh candidates, and how successful it is in satisfying the skill gap.
Okay. So thanks, Suchita. Good afternoon, everyone. Good to share the panel with Sanjeev. Suchita, to answer your question, I will probably just give a step back and give everyone a synopsis or a background of what has happened in the last 5 to 6 months, right? From the time COVID has hit us and the lockdown started, a lot of people started working from home. All of us currently, largely work remotely or working from home. And adoption of technology has been pushed ahead by at least 2 decades, if not more. Many organizations have had to be pushed to use technology, adopt technology, right? Additionally, use analytical tools to ensure that whatever is required to be done, gets done. Right? A lot of employees, like you were also saying before we started, have gone back to their hometown. So a lot of positions are created, but organizations are now looking at hiring from a very different perspective. They're not really just looking at hiring, headcount or people with, hands, legs, and a head, but they're now looking at people who are more productive, who are more resilient as a workforce. So first and foremost, I think from a softer aspect, the skill set of an employee is changing, right? And I don't see that going back to the way it was pre-COVID. Whatever we call it, the new normal or the way ahead, employers are going to look for people who are more productive, which means that they will have to be more skilled and continuously keep upskilling. So I think the first skill that employers are looking for is on how learning to learn. It's very important how each one of us keep upskilling, right? I think that's very important. How do we ensure that we are productive for an organization beyond what our measures were previously? And I think the third aspect that employers are now looking at is whether it's, remote working or wherever people are, right? Today we have call center agents sitting in Northeast taking our calls, right? Back office work is getting done. So it really doesn't matter. So geography is actually becoming boundaryless. And that's the best part, right? We are not now looking at hiring people from the large, cities or the metros. Today, as employers, we could hire from anywhere across the country because a lot of work will continue to be remote, and many organizations will have, technology adoption and ensure that people work from wherever they are. So couple of things, right? One, wherever I am, I could look for jobs across the country or maybe across the globe, given the current scenario, right? Likewise, employers in India could actually hire employees from other countries as well. The remote work, right? Project basis that can get done. So let's understand that our geographies are becoming boundaryless. Let's understand that our skill sets have to be upped dramatically and drastically, right? Like Sanjeev was saying that in his plants itself, automation is being included, and his own employees have to be upskilled to use technology. That's the case even for new people he's going to hire. So he will look for people who understand and adopt technology faster than somebody who says, "Abhi tak maine use nahi kiya, aage kaise hoga?" Right? So it's very, very important. Thirdly, let's remember, people who have gone back to their hometowns, largely manual workers, right? Knowledge workers are really not going back and sitting idle. It's the manual workers who have gone back home and will come back to cities to look for employment, right? And that's where I think it is very critical for all of us to identify what skills they had before they went, right? And what are the skill sets required when they're coming back to work, and how do we actually narrow the skill gap? Of course, a lot of state governments are now creating the databases. They're trying to map skills, trying to see, what jobs can be given locally, what can happen if they migrate. But I think it's important as a society, as an skilling ecosystem, as industry, that we ensure that people come back and they get decent waged employment, far beyond what they were doing before they went back to their hometowns. So there has been a disruption in hiring. There has clearly been a huge requirement of, as I heard this term called RUN, reskilling, upskilling, and new skilling. So this whole requirement is kicked in such a large way, and I keep hearing this from all L&D folks that I think the learning and development professionals have been the busiest in the last 6 months. They were never in this kind of a demand earlier. So obviously, upskilling, reskilling, and new skilling, is a huge requirement and here to stay for the next many, many years. Sorry, you're on mute, Suchita.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Now, my next question goes to Mr. Lyrie. What is your suggestion for the kind of vocational courses that can be started in collaboration with the universities and colleges in the rubber sector for better aligned candidates for the rubber industries? Sir?
Okay. I'm audible.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So see, the rubber sector is actually very huge, and there are a very couple of industries within the rubber sector. Now, I'm not going to specifically talk about only rubber recycling because that might be only I mean just a little bit part of the entire gamut. But generally, if I look at the skills that I employ in on my shop floors, yeah, particularly people who would be knowing extrusion, people who would be knowing milling, compounding, uh, autoclaving. I think these are the four uh, uh, broad skills which all rubber companies would need. And whatever little bit of exposure I have to the RSDC courses, I think RSDC is actually covering that. And the certification programs like the JRT, etc., that we do, this is more or less kind of covered. But the I think when it comes to a particular company, then it might come in. Like for example, if I say, I mean, if I if I use the term milling, now a milling for a recycler and the I mean to a tire manufacturer or to a rubber polymer compounder are going to be three different processes. So there I think would be a requirement, and that the way I believe, and I think we have had conversations on that. So this particular getting into that specific, I think is best done through the industry academic partnership. Uh, because not too many trainers will be available. The guys who are doing it day in and day out, I think, would be much more, capable to pass on that skill. But that makes that person much. To have that specific skill to get into this type of industries. At the same time, I think the common skills will always be required. When I mean common skills, are the general skill sets that we see in ITI is like the electricians, fitters, and so on and so forth. Um, uh, the and here I would again, go back to what I said, and Ricky also alluded to that, is to have that to have people be open to further learning, because what an ITI will teach, so only the ITI degree may get them a job, but to be relevant to that particular job, they would need to understand how the skill can be actually implemented. More importantly, I think, and that NAPS currently facilitates that. My very limited knowledge, you guys are the experts, is that trade thing has been taken off. So I can really, somebody coming in with a fitter certificate can actually also be appointed as an operator, and that's how I think people do get this opportunity to utilize their skill in different domains. The organizations like us has the opportunity to actually place the people where there is a need. So these are the specific questions, but I think I will again go back, because I think that makes all our decisions and differences come from the mind. I think that is where all of us do have a role to play, because we are in for actually a new world. This is indeed a new world, as we have been talking for some time. And I do like runs, Niti. It is true. Yeah.
True. Absolutely. Yes.
My next question is with Niti ma'am. What are the new initiatives adapted by skilling organizations to plug the skilling needs of the industries?
Sure. So, the moment the lockdown happened, what everyone did was move from physical classroom training to virtual life training, right? Or virtual instructor-led training, or VILT as we all call it, right? So I think that shift happened pretty quickly for most of us, right? I think almost everyone will have access to some LMS and some e-learning content and all of that. We were trying to use it, which did not happen, right? So I think the first shift that happened was moving from ILT to VILT. So from instructor-led training to virtual instructor-led training, right? So and I think that by April, I think those things were settled down. Everyone decided this is the way forward. And as much as we kept hearing that students who are in rural areas or in remote locations will not have bandwidth to access, our experience has been, and I think most training providers experience has been, that students do find ways and means to at least get that 1 hour or 2 hour of connectivity to continue learning, right? So I think that was the first shift. The second shift that happened, and I think it became important, and probably it came up from our experiences when we were teaching, is how do I improve pedagogy of learning and how do I improve learner engagement? Because teaching in a physical classroom is very different from teaching in a virtual or a remote, model. So which is why pedagogy of learning got changed, right? And then engagement tools came in, because now I can't do 4 hours or 8 hours of classes. I'll probably have to do 1 or 2 hours of classes to ensure that my learner is learning, right? What else happened along with that? People came up with innovative ideas of how do I engage. Let me give them assignments to do at home. Let me ask them to come back and make presentations. So a lot of soft skills or behavioral skills also got included while we were doing technical trades training. So while otherwise this was a separate module or a separate chapter, eventually all this became a cohesive or a comprehensive curriculum that had to be taught. After that, what happened is, okay, fine, we've done it right, we are engaging, we are teaching, but how can I better my learning for my student, right? That's right, a lot of technology tools got kicked in. Okay, things like augmented reality, simulators, cloud infrastructure, all of those were looped in, because initially, obviously, training companies were hesitant. Is it a short-run thing? Should I make investments? Should I not make investments? But when all of us realize that this is long-term, this is not changing in the near future, I think a lot of engagements got built with education technology companies, right? And which is where I'm saying tools like AR, maybe a lot of data analytical tools came into the picture, a lot of simulators and cloud infrastructure got kicked in. So this whole thing about, and I keep hearing this unfortunately from many senior stakeholders in the industry, that skilling cannot be virtual or skilling cannot be online or remote. Actually, the last 6 months has killed that myth. There are ways and means. Of course, nobody can replace hands-on learning. But that can be done in the OJT form, the way Sanjeev was explaining. After deployment of the student at a workplace, that hands-on can also be learned. But before that, a lot of technology tools can be used to ensure our learners learn. And that's been a big shift. I don't see that changing. In fact, even if you look at, I think NSDC, MSD, everyone has accepted that virtual learning or online learning is the way forward, at least for the near future. Of course, there are some ministries and some industries who are holding back, but our experience is, I think, adoption of and using technology is the way forward. There are many tools which are already out in the market, and the education technology companies are so many, and everyone is experimenting every day. There's so much of innovation happening. I think learning will become a lot more seamless using technology, and it will only scale. Also, because now I'm not restricted to 20 students in a class. I can probably talk to 200 students. I can get the best of trainers to reach out to the best of students. So this whole thing, that we kept hearing, and if you do any skill development program, the biggest problem will be, how do I get good trainers? right? Because okay, I'm probably doing it in Jhabua in Jharkhand, but I can't get a good trainer in Jhabua in Jharkhand. But now that's not the case. There's no problem at all. So there are lots of upsides. Of course, we have to find a fine balance. We have to rationalize what we are doing. It is not a 0 and 1 game, right? We keep saying, the COVID is here to stay. Offices, classrooms are all here to stay. So it's not going to go away completely. But I think there will be a balance. And this whole learning model of 10, 20, 70 will only evolve with a lot of technology intervention, self-learning, and, like I said, continuous learning, learning to learn, ability to learn ourselves. I think all of that has suddenly moved in the last 6 months. We were all, oh, this is how I learn. I need to see a teacher in class, only then will I learn. That has shifted completely. Right. So I think that's what has happened. I'm very happy to say that I think most training companies and PIAs have actually adopted this shift very nicely. And I think even students are very happy with this shift, and they're engaging with all the stakeholders. So, yeah.
That was a really amazing session to hear from our eminent speakers, Mr. Lahiri and Ms. Sharma. Thank you so much. I would like to thank you for giving us your precious time and for sharing your viewpoint and knowledge with RSDC.
Sure.
I hereby am just summarizing the takeaway from this enlightening session that we had today. I feel that industries must look into and invest in new skillings to better position themselves for the future. And by learning new skills, there will be an optimal engagement and retention of skilled workforce. And I also feel that by embracing new skills, today's youth can drive business amid this crisis.
Yeah,
That is
absolutely.
how I summarize this today's session. I hope all the viewers have gained a lot of input from this session, and looking forward for your active participation in the next sessions as well. Stay tuned, stay at home, be safe, and please like and share our Facebook post and help us to reach out to maximum numbers of people around the country. Thank you for attending this session. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Suchita.